Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of this story time. And if you're new, first of all, my name is Arij and I make videos that document my self-growth, specifically the process of finding my identity whilst growing up between two oftentimes conflicting cultures. So I was born in a Pakistani Muslim household and I was raised in secular Canadian society. So if any of that is relatable to you, please feel free to subscribe to follow me along on this life journey and see where it takes me. Oh my god, I just filmed part 1 of this video. So if you haven't watched this, I would highly recommend that you watch part 1 first, just so you've got the order of events in place. But if you really don't want to watch part 1 right now, that's fine. You come back to it later. But my recommendation is to watch these story times in this specific order. Are you ready? So part 1 of my video that relates to this one, like running away from home, and then watch my story times videos, like 2 of them, of when my parents found out about my boyfriend Garrett. And then come back to this video because that's the order of events. The first part 1, running away, happened first. Then it was my parents found out about Garrett, and then now this is a couple months later. And yes, okay, let's get started. I'm just gonna sip this tea. So this story is labeled part 2 because both part 1 and this video are about the process of me moving out of my family house. And if you're not familiar at all with South Asian culture, women typically do not move out of their parents' house unless they have gotten married. Like, moving out to live on your own independently, to live your own life, is just not a thing. It's very frowned upon. It's demonized, actually. So I wanted to share my story because this event is the biggest thing that happened that led me to where I am today, living by myself, living with my boyfriend, like in downtown Toronto in our own apartment, like completely free from not completely free, but 85% free from cultural and religious pressures. The first video, the part 1, ended at the beginning of second year. So I left home in the middle of the night with the help of my friend Maha at the end of August, and then I started my second year of university. I went back to Kingston, which is where I was going to school, immediately after I left home, pretty much like a week later, and then I did my 8 months at school. I didn't talk to my parents for a while. For a couple of weeks, we were both very angry at each other. There was a lot of conflict, so I didn't want to speak to them until around the end of September or something, where they came to visit me in Kingston, and we kind of made up. We didn't actually make up, we just kind of put a band-aid on the situation. We didn't really talk about anything, but we were a family again, and we were talking again. So now, the next time I was home after I had left was for a Thanksgiving break, and that is the weekend that my parents found out about Garrett, and all hell broke loose, to be honest. So that happened, and basically after that, no one wanted to talk about the situation. I started living in Kingston again after they found out about Garrett. I probably went home for Christmas break. I probably did. But the thing is, any time that I went home after they had found out about Garrett, there was just so much tension, and there was like a gigantic elephant in the room that nobody wanted to address. We were just walking around acting like everything was normal, everything was fine. No one wanted to bring it up. So I went back for Christmas break, and then the next summer rolled around. So the summer after second year. And if you watched part 1 of this video, you would know how awful the summer after first year was, because being at university, living away from home, I had a full taste of what freedom feels like and what it really feels like to live for yourself and to do what you want and to not feel the intense pressures of other people's expectations of you bearing down on you. And it was amazing. Like, those months are amazing, blissful, but there was always that anticipation and anxiety knowing that I had to return home in the summer. And the summer break was 4 months. So this summer was even worse than last summer because of the events that had occurred in the past couple of months. So first of all, I'd already left home in the middle of the night without telling my parents at the end of last summer break. And then they found out that I was dating a white non-Muslim man. And I think what happened was at the end of like the day when they found out about Garrett, the day that I went back to Kingston because I had a test or something, I think they kind of convinced themselves that I was going to break up with him or that I just wasn't seeing them anymore. Although I don't remember explicitly telling them that I had broken up with him. I think they just like convinced themselves that that had been what happened, which is why I was able to come back home on the breaks. And that's why no one talked about it, because they were like, oh, it's just gonna, if we ignore it, it will go away, which is untrue. But yeah, so this summer was, can you believe it? It was even worse than the previous summer. The previous summer was really freaking bad. And this is also the summer that I started my YouTube channel, actually. So if you go all the way back on my channel, you will see videos from this summer. And one of the very specific videos that I made was this one. It was called I Just Want to Have the Freedom to Live My Life, or something along those lines. And that was me expressing my true thoughts and beliefs for the first time ever. Like, I talked about it here and there with Garrett, but I never really processed any of those thoughts because I felt like I was wrong to. I felt like these thoughts were not really what I was supposed to be feeling. There was a part of me that really internalized all of the emotional and verbal abuse that I'd faced a couple months prior about how bad I was and how terrible of a human being I was and how I was ruining everyone's life and that I was selfish and all that stuff. And I felt bad about myself. So I made this video. I haven't watched it in a while, so I don't exactly remember what was happening in that video. But what I do know is that I was expressing my frustration with the expectations that were placed on my life and that I wasn't allowed to be with Garrett. I wasn't allowed to go outside as freely as I wanted. I just wasn't allowed to experience life to the fullest because of all these other people. And that video is very emotional. That was the first time I like opened up on my channel ever at all. I'm like a little tiny baby there. But it's a powerful video as well. But yeah, so I posted that video, and the reason I posted that specifically then was because I think it was a couple months into the summer, and basically my mindset was like, yeah, I'm gonna do what I want. And although like within like certain boundaries. In the previous summer, I would still respect my parents' wishes for me not to like go outside every single day. But the second year, the summer after second year, I was like, I'm gonna go outside every day. And Garrett and I were both taking statistics in the summer, so I did have like actual coursework to study. So again, I would just say, okay, I'm going to the library, and I would leave at like 9 a.m. in the morning. I would get to Garrett's house at like 10 a.m. We would spend all day together, and then I would get home like the latest possible time, which was when it got dark. My mom was like adamant about make sure you get home before it gets dark. So that in the summertime, that was around like 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. So I was literally spending all day, every day outside of the house, which was shocking, to say the least, to my parents. But they also, I guess, I don't know, they didn't really question me that much, for the most part, at least. Like, they just were like, okay, whatever. Go ahead. And I remember I was at one point, I was like, do they really believe that I'm going to the library every single day, all day, every day? Like, they're not. It's weird, kind of weird that they're not questioning me. But I obviously didn't want to bring it up. And I think the reason they wouldn't want to question me was because they didn't really want to know the real answer. They didn't want to accept what was happening. It wasn't like peaceful though. Like, even though they weren't like constantly questioning me about where I was going, things like that, every couple of weeks something would flare up and I would get like an intervention kind of thing, and they would basically be like, stop, and I'd be like, no, and I'd be like, stop, and then I'd be like, okay, fine, I'll like chill out a little bit, and then I think I would like relax, like I would just like go out a little less for a week or something, and then I would just go back to what I was doing before. So a lot of tension, a lot of unspoken, like unacknowledged issues brewing because they still didn't know if Garrett was in the picture. They had no idea. I'd never talked about it, nothing. Anyway, so I made that video. a week or so after that, there was another big intervention. What the intervention was because I had been, like I said, like I was telling my parents I was going to study, and this time I was actually going to study, but I didn't have a chance to tell my parents because the evening before there was a lot of tension. So I think there was a fight in the house or something, or like people were mad at each other. So I didn't really have a chance to be like, okay, like guess what? By the way, I'm going outside tomorrow, because that's just a sensitive topic in our household at the time. Then in the morning, both my parents were sleeping, and I had to leave. Like I wanted to leave like ASAP. So I was like, oh, I'm just gonna leave who cares? I'm just gonna leave a note on the counter saying that I'm going to this coffee shop. And yeah, so I left a note. 1 p.m., 2 p.m., I got a phone call from both my dad, my mom, like constantly, and I answered, and they're like, come home right now. You can't do this. You didn't even tell us you were going outside. Like, you have to come home right now. And I was terrified. So I did go home. And that's when this intervention happened. And they were basically like, you are too much. You are doing too much. You are not respecting us. You are, whatever you are doing, the lifestyle that you are living does not coexist with our values and morals. Like, you are being an awful selfish person. And to be honest, like, I kind of see like their point of view too, like as a parent, because at this point I didn't respect them at all. Like I would leave home at like 9 a.m. and come home at like 10 p.m., like 10:30. I didn't even see them at all. But obviously the reason I did that was because I was kind of pushed into that place, like where I couldn't tell them where I was, because I didn't have the space to tell them where I was. Like there was no communication, there was no trust, there was no relationship at all. So that was like the big blow up that summer. And after that, the whole situation was kind of amplified. And at that point, I had also, because I had filmed that video a week or two prior to this event, I had processed my emotions and realized that, like, I'm not really the problem here. Like, I'm not bad. I'm not actually that bad. Like I watch like filming that video and then watching it back and editing, it kind of put me on my own side a little bit more, if that makes sense. Like I had more self-respect in a way. And so I stood up to my parents and I was like, no, I want to keep doing what I'm doing. But anyway, that day ended and they got like more restrictive, started questioning me more again, and things got a bit more heated. And then I decided that enough was enough. I started thinking about leaving home again. This whole like intervention thing happened at the end of July. So I still had all of August in Toronto before I went back to Kingston in September before school started. And this decision was more difficult to make because the last time I was in I was in a fight or flight mode, because I was genuinely fearful for not my life. Like I didn't think my parents were going to kill me or anything, but like I genuinely was moving because of fear, because I didn't know what was going to happen when my dad came home from the sleep clinic. But this time it was a lot more calm and required a lot more sober thinking. Sober as in like I wasn't in a weird altered fight or flight state. I was just like, okay, here I have this really intense problem, and how am I going to solve this? The two options that I have are stay here for the next month. Do I think that I can bear it? Do I think that I can handle the extra restrictions that are now going to be placed on me? Do I think I can deal with that? Or do I feel like I need to get myself out of the situation? And because I had already like ran away the summer before, I had a lot more courage this time to actually go ahead and be like, okay, I'm gonna leave. And obviously it was not easy again at all. The last time I left, I had told them that I left because I didn't want them to stop me from going to school at Queen's, right? And I told them that as soon as I left the house last summer, I had gone back to Kingston. But this time I wasn't in a survival mode. It was a very conscious decision for me to make that was like, I am not wanting to live in this house anymore. I do not want to live with you anymore. I am not going to deal with your restrictions. I am not going to be in your control. It was a bigger statement. It was more final as well. So that made the magnitude of the situation a lot greater. But still, I knew that I could not bear the next month at all. So I gathered my courage once again, and I did the same thing that I did last time, but this time my stuff wasn't even all together. Like, it took me a couple days to put everything together. I kind of was like gathering everything into my closet. So my parents, like, no one like knew. I don't know if I'm pretty sure I probably told my sisters again at this point, but maybe not. It's really hard to remember the details because it happened such a long time ago. Packed my stuff over the couple of days in the closet, and the day it was done, I was ready. I called up Maha again. She helped me so much. Oh my God, Maha, I'm so grateful for you if you're watching this video. Oh, and also the other problem was, it wasn't a problem, but another obstacle was Garrett's family. Like, were they willing to house me for a month? Because last time it was a week. It was very temporary, and I was going to Kingston right after. But this would be a month, and they did. Wow. I have been blessed with so many supportive, understanding people in my life. It's beyond words, like, how grateful I feel about it. But anyway, Garrett talked to them about it. He explained the situation again. I think they might have even watched my video because it had been up at that point. I don't know. I have no idea. I haven't really talked to them about this yet, like about their feelings towards it all back when it was happening. But yeah, they approved it. And I called up Maha. We literally did the same. It was like a deja vu moment. I waited till my parents were asleep, and I moved my bags downstairs. In the middle of the night, I like minimized the volume on the alarm system. And this time it was like I said, it was so much more final, so much more of a statement. Like, I'm literally running away from home. Like, I'm literally running away for the sake of leaving. Like, not even to just go to school because I'm scared they're not gonna let me go to school anymore. It was literally because I just didn't want to be there, and I wanted them to know that I didn't want to be there. And then my cat, like, I have a cat at home named Bambi. I was so sad to see her because she was just like, she basically spends a lot of her time on the main floor. And she was just like confused why all my bags were there. And so she was standing like quite close to me and just like watching what was happening. And that like broke my heart in the moment. And I literally had to like consciously like turn my head away from her so I wouldn't look at her and feel upset. Maha came, we did the same thing. This time it was raining outside, and I remember thinking, wow, pathetic fallacy. Like, the weather, the storm is what I feel right now. And it was like pouring. I put my bag in her trunk, multiple bags in her trunk, and we drove to Garrett's house. And again, the feelings were indescribable. It was even worse this time, like, because it was more of like, last time I could kind of attribute it to, oh, like, I was pushed into a corner and I left out of fear. But this time it was like, I was not pushed into a corner necessarily, like, I was not in any immediate danger. I made this choice. I just made it. I was completely responsible for what was happening this time. Not really, but you know what I mean? Like, relative to the other time, I was more responsible of what happened. More of the blame would be put on me this time. So we drove to Garrett's house again, and it was the middle of the night again. Oh my God, when I think of this story, I cannot imagine that it was myself. Like, I'm like, where did this girl come from? Like, where did she get all this courage? How did she do this? But I guess when you're in a situation where it is just so difficult to exist, like, just to exist, you just take these steps. Yeah, so we got to Garrett's house. I remember being like, I'm outside. He came outside. His house was dark. Everyone was asleep. I walked into his house. I said bye to Maha. She left. I put my stuff in his living room, and we were talking. I was obviously upset. Like, his mom heard us downstairs, so she came downstairs because she was asleep to check on us, like, make sure everything was okay. And like, everything was not okay, but like in the moment, like, everything was okay, I guess. And I was in shock. More in shock this time than last time. And we went upstairs to Garrett's room, and I remember just like sitting on the bed. I have this picture in my head. I was sitting on the bed. The room was like completely black, like dark. And I was just staring like straight ahead, being like, what the fuck just happened? Again, I turned my phone off. But before I turned my phone off, I texted my mom. I said, don't worry, I am safe. I'm with Violet. My friend Violet, I always just used her as like a thing because I didn't want them to know that I was at Garrett's house, because if you remember from my story time, my cousin actually knew where Garrett lived. So I didn't want my family to like show up at Garrett's house. That was also a really, really scary thing that I was afraid of, but it didn't end up happening because I think in South Asian culture, people do everything behind closed doors. They don't want to show their ugly side in public. So I feel like that, at least for me, it wasn't really that big of a possibility, but it was definitely a big fear of mine. Spent the next month at Garrett's house, just pretending like everything was normal when it wasn't. We also had a exam, like literally like a week or two after this whole incident, and I had to email the professor and just basically tell him what was going on and get the exam extended. And both of us still, like, we did the exam later, but neither of us were in the headspace to be able to study or anything, and we barely passed statistics, like barely. Like, I think he felt bad for us, to be honest. I feel like I failed the exam, and then the professor just felt bad for us and then passed us both. I don't know. And yeah, so that's that. We went back to Kingston a month later in September, just started living life again. Because when you go through something like this, it's really hard. The other thing is I didn't have any therapy or counseling or anyone to talk to, and I feel like it would have been extremely beneficial, especially like maybe talking to a social worker, because you really need that support. Like, you are basically leaving a support system that you have known your whole life and kind of walking into an uncertain future, especially like if you're like me. I was so young. I was like 19, 20, and I didn't have financial support. I stopped receiving financial support from my family back when they found out about Garrett. Like, I didn't take any more money from them after that. But leaving home like this, it was more of like, I'm separating myself from you. And from then it was like, if something had happened, I couldn't rely on them at all, and that was really scary. That is a video for another time, like how my financial situations went and what happened there, and I will make that at some point, but not today. Anyway, thank you for watching. Again, if you know of anyone that would benefit from hearing my story, someone who's been through something similar or is about to go through something similar, share this video. Like, it helps immensely just knowing that you are not the only person in this world that is going through something like this. It's hard to describe, but when I hear other people's stories and when I watch them, it inspires me and gives me courage to make moves in my own life. Well, I'm sharing these stories because, first of all, I want to process them, release these events that have been like in me for so long, but I also want to do it for other people because I've gotten so many messages from people telling me how much they appreciate my honesty and my willingness to talk about it all. So yes, thank you for watching, and I love you. I love you so much. Please like this video if you like it, and tell me what you think. Honestly, like, what were you thinking when you're watching this video? Would you ever see yourself doing something similar? I don't know, just talk to me. I would love to get to know you. And yeah, thank you. Bye. Love you.